and over to our next guest, right? Another hands-on AI specialist, and that is Sarah Hawks. Sarah, how are you today? There you are.
I feel like I was gate crashing a talk before, but that's a very, very, very tough talk. Thank you so much. And as you can see, I have not AI generated art, just
You have AI art on the wall? This is so good. I remember our first call, and it was so great. The way you talked about, doing AI and ML projects. It was just amazing because with you, we're really going to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because you have actually implemented a lot of AI and ML projects, and that's why we would love to do an interview with you, just to understand what we as entrepreneurs need to look at when we want to now, we all inspired, right? So what we need to look at. So my first questions, and we all ask our speakers, what fascinates you about AI?
Wow, that's a very, very, very cool question to start with. I think just we haven't even touched the surface when it comes to AI. And I think there's just so much, not just technically to learn, but also it's just fascinating. I mean, we live in a world now where we type some text and we can generate something, where we haven't even quite touched robotics yet. We just haven't touched the surface yet. And I feel like all those films we were watching back in the day, these sci-fi-esque films with the flying cars, we are like living in that era. So we just haven't, like I said, touched the surface yet. And I just can't wait to live in a world where AI isn't scary, but it's really just, it's solving all these different problems, not just business related problems. I think that's when you talk about AI, I'm not thinking business, I'm thinking futuristic sci-fi self-driving cars, that sort of world. And I just don't think we've touched the surface yet, but we haven't even touched the surface with machine learning and AI in companies. So I just think opportunities are endless. I think it's just a really fascinating field. I think the impact that companies can have by truly using machine learning and AI, it's endless. So yeah, I just think there's endless opportunities.
That's great. I'm actually still waiting for the hoverboard in
So
if you could do something about that, I would be super happy. I'll be your first customer, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But this all sounds too great. What's the secret behind ML and AI projects? Javier made it seem so easy. I can write English a little bit at least. I might misspell that, but I get it going. But apparently, and I'm running a software company as well, and we also face that apparently not all AI projects are that easy. And maybe this prompting is really very unique to the generative AI side. If we are covering different topics that you were talking about, shed some light on how real implementation projects look like.
Yeah, so just to give some context to everyone about my background, I've been working in the world of data, machine learning, AI for the last over 10 years. And I've worked in lots of different types of companies. I worked at a gym, I've worked at underwear companies, my last role was at an art company. So I've worked in lots of different domain areas, and there is just a common theme that I've taken away from each area. There is a disconnect between people who have the knowledge and people that are running the company. So that's one of the biggest challenges. So when I started out my career as a data scientist, I was working at a gym and I was still relatively new to my career. And I took on this segmentation project. Actually, I wanted to take on a segmentation project, but because the board of directors or whoever was in charge, they were like, hey, use this consultancy. This consultancy took a lot of money, surveyed 200 customers, and came up with these 4 triangles is like, oh, passive customers, engaged customers. That project would have taken an hour to do with millions of customer data points. And no one wanted to pay attention to the data scientists, but yet it's okay to spend millions to get a 200 survey result, which was here's the 4 quadrants of your lazy customer, your passive customer, your engaged customer. And I had built so many. Oh, and the hilarious part was this consultancy had used my models. So I built these survival models, and this is 5-6 years ago, and come a long way since then. I built these survival models which showed patterns between, or not even patterns, the probability and the likelihood of somebody leaving the gym because they had because let's say age, the time that they would come to the gym, the day of week that they come to the gym, so lots of different factors. And they actually use these survival plots to make their pitches to the company I was working in. So it was a very frustrating, very annoying a world to be in, but it didn't make any sense to me. Why would you spend so much money to do a subpar project, which is based on qualitative research, based on only a very, 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 very small sample of your customers, and not look at actual data of your customers? And I still don't have an answer. And again, not to, oh my God, I hope no one from my company or ex-company is hearing this, but now that the company is investing in data science and machine learning, and people realize that how powerful and how you cannot be successful in the real world with this. But at the time, I don't know. So that was my first.
I understand it. We amongst ourselves, it's just about 200 C-level people here currently looking into the mirror and asking what they spent on their last AI project, right, Robert? What, right? Huh? What was the invoice? But I totally get it. And I think you already mentioned it. Like, what can we do to bridge the gap? Is it kind of knowledge? Is it trust? Is it risk mitigation? Why are we doing this? Like, and how can we somehow overcome this?
That I can't answer, and that's something that, like I said, I just think there's a disconnect between who is running the company and or the knowledge that ICs or independent contributors have, and I am forever struggling to harness that bridge as well. And I think it just comes from the fact that maybe it comes, again, I don't know. I would love to, I'd love to ask the audience.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So like I mentioned in this example, where somehow using qualitative research on just 200 customers seems to be worth company time and money, but not spending just, like I said, under a week to do an actual segmentation project on real life customer data, which would have they would have had to spend nothing because I would have just done it. So again, I don't understand where the disconnect comes from. I think it's still new, the world of data. So AI in companies, without data, AI means nothing. It starts with data. So how you use your data, how you use these machine learning algorithms. But data is still relatively new. It's been around for a while, but the conversations around data is still relatively new. And I think just that adoption, companies are just, again, I'm not trying to be negative, they're not slow to adopt, but I think it's just a disconnect between knowledge, I guess. Maybe that's maybe that's the best way to
super interesting for us. This is a great lesson, actually, and I would like to dig deeper into what, like, let's assume, little Marcus goes back to his company and says, like, I want to start an AI project. So, naturally I would look at, how should the team be assembled? What kind of people do you think we as entrepreneurs should be hiring, employing, deploying, so we get maximum likelihood for success?
So I've seen different models. I feel like people first invest so much time in, hey, let's build a team together, and they don't quite know how to onboard a team because it's a slightly different stack of people. And I've also seen the other way, which is having, again, the talent, but not giving the right projects, or then the project getting siloed. So I really think it starts by not just being, not saying, hey, let's do an AI project, but what type of problem are you trying to solve with AI, and building a team or a function around that. So my last company, for example, I was working on recommendation algorithms. Now, some companies would have a team around recommendations, whereas my previous company had more product focused areas, but they didn't see recommendations as a subset on its own. But the problems that I was solving and the impact that I was having commercial impact. I was working on email, I was working on app, I was working on websites. So I was this sort of one person show. But the way I see it, it's, well, firstly, what problem are you trying to solve? And then building a team around that. So it's not just, hey, let's just hire a bunch of AI practitioners. It requires lots of different skill sets to bring a project to life. So I think first framing the problem is really important. Then having the right owner of the project is important. Then having the right skill sets. So who's building the machine learning, who's building, so for example, it starts from, again, it always starts from data. So how do you have the right data? How do you extract this data? How do you build these machine learning models? Can you use machine learning to solve your problems? How do you then put these machine learning models into production? How do you surface the end result to the final user? So there's lots of different problems you're trying to solve. It isn't an AI problem. It's a problem using AI, or it's a problem that could AI is playing a subset. So there's lots of different people that are involved, and that's something that I've built organically, or I try to fetch people. I work with backend, I work with front end, I work with DevOps, I work with data engineers. I myself play many different roles in industry, but it's lots of different people are required to solve this problem, and that's something that I haven't seen, at least in my career so far, done very well. And I've also worked in lots of smaller companies. So my previous company had 60 engineers, but I was the only machine learning engineer, for example. And I'm worried that this is going to turn into me bashing previous companies. So I'm sorry, previous companies, but I have a lot of
completely
frustration.
normal. I've seen this before. Like 6 people who manage influencers, but one person who actually managed the data warehouse. But I see Edward has a question.
Yes, I'm wondering, you said think of the problem first before you ask the team to create the right team. But wouldn't it also be interesting to see if having the right people on board, how they play with the problem? Because the more you define a problem, the more the results will be what you asked for.
Of course, but again, the disconnect starts to happen because, like I was saying, you don't trust the person that you hired, or you're not quite sure exactly how this will have an impact. It's also about people, there's change resistance involved. There's also this, but I didn't think of this first idea. So that's why I've worked in companies where they were very sure they needed a data scientist. Now, data scientists are using machine learning to solve problems, doing exactly what you're saying. But then they were like, no, I just needed someone to build my dashboards. So then all of a sudden, there's this change in what you hired someone to do. So that is possible. But then also you can get frustrated because they're spending so much time doing research to solve a problem for you, and you're not seeing results. So that's why I just think it's more beneficial to both parties for a problem to be stated, and then you're hiring someone to say, hey, can you solve this problem for me? But if you also like this idea that, hey, I want to bring this distinguished scientist type person into my company to tell me, then that's great. But then you have to really trust this person. And also it's more a consultancy type role. But that's, again, like I haven't personally seen in my career. I've been sort of back and forth, like, why am I fighting with my management about this? It's like, hey, you hired me to do X, but then you're asking me just to build dashboards, for example. So
it sounds like you know a lot about this topic, and I think you've run into some walls. There's one thing we love in EO, it's not the success stories, it's the fuck-up stories. So I bet you have a dozen. Could you have one or two?
Of course. So that's actually how I got that's actually how I felt very confident and got very good at the field that I'm in, because I had so many failures. When I was starting out, again, early on in my career, I was given a project where they were trying to use, the projects were defined. The project was based on someone's first purchase of a box. Would they recommend a friend? So something like super bizarre. And if you just spend 5 minutes looking at the data, there is no relationship between somebody buying a box and them recommending a friend. And this was something I was stuck working on for 6 months. And I wasn't able to critically argue. I wasn't able to say, we don't actually need to use machine learning to solve this problem. And so I was stuck working on a project. I was young, and my career also made mistakes along the way I should take ownership for, but ultimately the problem just wasn't defined correctly. And so it was a waste of resources, it was a waste of time, it was just like, what is going on here? Why are we trying to solve this? I've worked in companies where they have research projects for machine learning, and they don't even have data. And you're like, what am I doing? How can you hire somebody to work as a machine learning engineer or data scientist without the starting point, which is data? I've worked in companies where I've been hired for the right reasons, and before you know it, all the tech teams are being disbanded, and then you're just one person. So trying to put all these models into production, but they don't go anywhere because people in the business, for whatever reason, don't trust what these models can do, just because there's some knowledge gap missing. So there's been lots of different reasons for the failure, and sometimes I could take ownership, which is just like I didn't frame the problem correctly, or I didn't advise the people who told me to build a project that, hey, these things were missing. And that's why I feel very strongly, and I feel it's my theme for today, frame the problem first.
Okay, but failing got a lot cheaper. That's one conclusion we can draw.
Well, it depends, because I've worked in, I think 6 months is a huge waste of time. It's a waste of, I think it's a waste of engineering time with company time. So the way I like to approach projects is with something called Agile Data Science. And Agile Data Science is working in sprints, so that so you're saying failing is not costly, but I say reduce it down to 2 weeks, so that in 2 weeks, you know if a project's going to fail or not fail. And so working in this agile methodology, you do fail fast, and failing is fine. It's not about building perfect projects. It's not about succeeding all the time. What I'm just very allergic to is seeing talented people spend 6 months, 1 year working on projects which weren't clearly defined, which could not be solved with machine learning, where it wasn't framed properly, the data wasn't framed properly. It could also be down to the practitioner as well. It's not always just the business's fault. But if you work in these agile methodologies, then yeah, failing is definitely not costly, but also then you fail fast. You fail fast, you move on, you try something else, and that's been my way of working, and that results in a lot of success, because I can pick projects that are going to be successful, and projects that aren't going to be successful, I prove them quickly, like machine learning will just not work. What's next?
So what makes a AI project work? When do we characterize it as successful?
Again, my theme of depends on the problem, but for example, depends what you're trying to, So my last role, I was working on recommendation engines, and that's one of the places where I had the most commercial impact in terms of the work I did. So let's say you're using machine learning AI to increase conversions. So are you actually seeing an increase in conversions? I've used machine learning to segment customers, which can identify customers that are more likely to repeat buy. And if we sent them an email, and that resulted in conversion being close to 100% that based on that email. So again, it's sort of reverse engineering. What are you trying to solve? But what you should see is hopefully commercial impact, depending on the domain you're in. I've been working on more e-commerce type places, so I would say increasing conversions. But it could be lots of things. Could be email conversion, could be app usage, could be website conversions, could be increase in purchases. You could have lots of different KPIs, and then you work backwards to see, does machine learning solve this? But there's lots of cases where, for example, I haven't built this personally, but email headings that have been generated using AI, those are more likely to convert than human generated email headings. And maybe with the example we saw before with the art, maybe people for some reason are more likely to buy AI art than not. I hope we don't come down that road. So there's certain metrics that a business needs to define, and this is where business oriented people are better than technical people, but you should see some commercial impact with your projects. It's not about doing interesting projects just because AI is cool, but it's actually about changing the landscape of the type of, it's not just changing landscape, it's about making the user, giving the user a better experience if that's your priority. So that's something that I like to prioritize on. I worked with my last company, recommendations and art, something I'm very passionate about, but I wanted to really surface art that was relevant to the user. I felt very strongly about that. And as a result, I built lots of different models that fed into this engine that resulted in surfacing not just art that was relevant to the user, but we also saw an increase in conversion on emails, on app, not quite website, but that's another story. So it's about, and Netflix also says it's about user happiness, it's about companies increasing their revenue, it's about increasing conversion, and it's also about building something that's useful and meaningful. So there's lots of things that define success in an ML project. And there's lots of things that define failure, but sometimes I think we're too premature to define failure. We don't actually test or ship something or test something. We just say, hey, this has failed, and then we give up on it. But yeah, reverse engineering from KPIs would be my advice.
Marcus, last words for you.
Last words always go to the speaker. What would be your one sentence for us entrepreneurs to take with us home tonight and dwell over it while we dream about our last successful or next successful ML project?
I think I've said this over and over again. I think it's just my theme, but really just what problem are you trying to solve? And I saw with the ChatGPT hype, my previous CEO was so excited and is messaging everyone, we have to use ChatGPT everywhere, but it doesn't quite work like that. So I think really just understanding which area. So for example, if you're, again, not quite a last thought, but just more sharing. So for example, if your homepage is really messy, or you're finding like you don't have enough traffic coming onto your homepage, then you think, can AI help solve this problem? So it's about what problems does your company currently face? And generally speaking, I find machine learning is very good when it comes to personalization and recommendations. So do look into that more. But machine learning and AI can really help in lots of areas, but please define your problem first.
I got that, and I will do it next time. Sarah, thank you so much. I could, continue the talk for hours. We could cover things like expectation management, actually, from us as in the C-level. What can you expect from ML project? But maybe next time. Thanks so much. Keep in touch. People, if you really want to know how to build ML projects, ping Sarah. She's available on LinkedIn as well. She is there. You will find her. Thanks so much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.